Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It happened at a party. Not a fight. Not a mistake. A statement. Loud. Deliberate. Public. She stood across from me, a drink in her hand, fire in her eyes, and yelled for everyone to hear. "You don't own me." People froze. Glasses paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. And I just stood there silent. Not humiliated. Not confused. Just done. She said it like a victory. Like a claim of independence. But independence wasn't the problem. The problem was the way she wanted it to sound like I was control. I wasn't. I never had been. I wasn't checking her phone. I wasn't tracking her moves. I wasn't even asking questions. I gave her space. More than most would. And yet, she treated that space like suffocation. That moment, in front of her friends, mine, strangers who didn't know our names, was the moment I saw the version of her she never hid that well. The one that needed conflict to feel powerful. And that night, I didn't respond. No scene. No defense. No counterattack. I just walked out. Quietly. No one followed me. She didn't either. Because she thought that was power, watching someone leave, believing they'll come back. But I didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because something inside me had shifted. Not cracked, severed. I replayed the last few months in my head. The subtle digs. The dismissive laughs. The way she stopped listening mid-sentence unless it was about her. The way everything I did started to feel like background noise to her spotlight. And still, I stayed. Until that line. 4 words. 8 syllables. No apology. The next morning, I packed a small bag. Essentials only. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't break anything. I just moved in silence. Left my keys on the counter. Phone turned off. Card access frozen. She wouldn't know until she needed something, and I wouldn't be there to help her find it. By noon, I was out of state. No announcement. No explanation. I had nothing to prove. Because the moment someone makes it clear they see you as control, not care, is the moment you stop convincing them otherwise. And while she was busy proving she didn't need me, she never asked what would happen when I stopped needing her back. A week after I left, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. Tyler. An old friend I used to train with before life got too crowded with excuses. We weren't close anymore, not by conflict, just distance. But I remembered him as someone who always paid quiet attention. He'd seen her at a bar. Not with a date. Not doing anything explicit. But she wasn't alone. And it wasn't neutral. She was laughing. Leaning in close to someone I didn't recognize. A guy with confidence too loud for the room. Tyler didn't take photos. He didn't need to. His message said enough. "Man, I thought you were still together." Guess not. That hit differently. Because even though I'd already walked away, I hadn't unhooked emotionally. Not yet. Some part of me was still processing, still trying to make sense of who she really was. Tyler's message wasn't an accusation. It was a mirror. I didn't respond. Instead, I scrolled through old memories, the way she used to light up when I came home, the way her hand used to find mine during silence. Those memories had sharp edges now. They didn't hurt like heartbreak. They stung like betrayal dressed in casual indifference. I thought about the party again. Her voice rising, saying, "You don't own me." Maybe she had been practicing that line for months. Maybe that moment was rehearsed. For him. For others. For herself. She wasn't yelling at me. She was performing. And I had finally left the audience. I didn't ask Tyler for more. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't search for proof. I didn't need it. Because real betrayal doesn't start with cheating. It starts with detachment disguised as independence. And she had been detaching long before she raised her voice. I began to clean up my digital life. Removed joint accounts. Changed passwords. Cut subscriptions that were in my name but for her benefit. And I watched, silently, as the ripple began. Bank notifications. Delivery rejections. Access denied. She hadn't even noticed yet. But she would. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it to reclaim space, physical, financial, emotional. The kind of space that gets slowly eroded when you're too busy justifying why someone's mood swings or cold shoulders are just stress and not slow disconnection. I started training again. Not for revenge. For recovery. Because the version of me that stayed through the passive slaps of "you're too much" or "I just need freedom" had already died. And the man who remained? He didn't raise his voice. He raised his standards. The more I pulled away, the clearer things became. Not because she confessed. She never would. But because people talk, devices remember. And patterns always surface when you finally stop making excuses for what you don't want to see. I started with the shared laptop. It was still synced to our cloud. Not because I was snooping, but because I never bothered logging her out. That's how careless it had become. There were screenshots, messages. Nothing scandalous on the surface, no nudes, no I love yous. Just conversations between her and that same guy Tyler saw her with. Casual tones, inside jokes, meeting times, vague plans. But the timestamps told the real story. They stretched back months. While I was cooking dinner, while I was in the next room editing reports, while I was canceling trips because she said she felt anxious, overwhelmed, like she just needed space. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was preoccupied. With a new storyline. I didn't rage. I didn't break anything. I just read. And with every line, my breathing slowed. Not from shock, from confirmation. It all clicked. The way she flinched when I touched her. The delayed responses. The phone flipped face down during dinner. The phrase she used one night, I feel like you're always around. Like my presence was a burden. She was already emotionally gone. I just hadn't been invited to the funeral. I moved on to the financials. Our accounts weren't joined, but I had access to the household card, the one we both used for groceries, bills, streaming. That card had recent charges from restaurants I'd never been to. 2 people, always dinner, and always followed by a lift home, not to our address. Again, no confrontation, just more lines on a map. I exported everything, folded it, labeled it, not to use against her, but to never forget what silence had taught me to see. I started deleting old photos from my phone, not out of anger, but to remove triggers, the kind that ambush you in moments of peace. Her smile, our trips, the captions that age poorly. One by one, they disappeared. She still hadn't contacted me. Not once. No, where are you? No, what happened? No, let's talk. She was silent. And that said more than 1,000 apologies ever could. Because you don't chase what you never valued. You don't look for what you never missed. I didn't need to catch her red-handed. She left fingerprints everywhere, and I finally had the clarity to see them for what they were. Not mistakes, but choices. It wasn't revenge. It was calculation. I knew she expected a reaction. Anger. Maybe even a desperate confrontation. That's the game. When someone pushes you far enough, they secretly hope you'll break just enough to make them feel important again. But I didn't break. I vanished. Deleted my old number. Switched service. Got a new SIM that only a handful of people had. Disabled every account we shared. Streaming, food delivery, home security. Left no logins behind. Changed every password linked to my name. Froze the card we both used. She'd notice, eventually. Not instantly. And that was the point. Disappearance isn't loud. It doesn't come with slammed doors or shouted ultimatums. It comes in quiet waves. A door not opening. A phone not answering. A bill unpaid. A silence too long to be called busy. I stayed offline for days. No posts. No stories. No status. Just gone. I checked into a short-term rental 3 cities away. Neutral, clean, cold. No memories. No echoes. Every morning, I ran. Not for fitness, for structure. For silence that wasn't filled with questioning myself. And while I ran, I thought. Not about her, but about how far I'd allowed it to go. How slowly disrespect becomes normal when it's wrapped in charm. How being understood turns into being managed. How partner becomes a project when someone stops loving you and starts controlling the narrative. On the 5th day, I got my first signal. An email, short, confused. Not emotional. Just logistics. Hey, I can't log into the account. Did you change something? No greeting. No warmth. No concern about where I was. Just access. Just function. I didn't respond. The next day, another. Hey, we need to talk. Still no apology. Still no, I miss you. Just an attempt to reel me back in, not with truth, but with urgency. And urgency isn't the same as care. I read the messages, then archive them. Not deleted. Archived. Because ghosts don't erase. They observe. A mutual friend texted me later that week. She's been asking around. Says she's worried. But worry comes from love, not from losing convenience. And I was done being convenient. I knew what was coming next. Not regret, not yet. Confusion, panic, and soon, isolation. Because when you remove yourself fully from someone who depends on your presence but never respected your value, they unravel. Not because you were everything, but because you were the one thing they thought would never leave. I didn't go looking for him. But the internet doesn't hide much when you stop pretending you don't want the truth. His name popped up in her messages. First name only. But paired with a few blurry memories, her laughing too hard at one specific DM, hiding her screen mid-scroll, a shared event she once claimed was just networking. I had enough to start digging. It didn't take long. He was a trainer. One of those always-on, personal brand kind of guys. High followers, low substance. I scrolled through his page, shirtless shots, gym advice, shallow motivation captions. But buried under all that was something else. A pattern. Same car in the background of multiple women's photos. Same hallway, same kitchen. Different names. He wasn't just seeing her. He was building rotations. She wasn't the exception. She was one of many. I didn't reach out to him. That would have been emotional. I didn't warn her. That would have been generous. I watched. I gathered screenshots. Dates. Overlapping check-ins, location tags, tagged comments he'd carelessly liked under women's posts. It wasn't about exposure. I had no audience. But I knew someone who did. An old colleague of mine, Megan, ran a wellness blog, Lifestyle Meets Accountability. She did exposés on shady trainers, fake supplement brands, stolen transformation photos. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I sent her the folder, no context, just raw data, she replied within 10 minutes. Is this real? I wrote back one sentence. You decide what to do with it. She did. 2 weeks later, her new post dropped. No names, but enough detail for anyone in the loop to connect dots. Captioned, the fitness fraud you're probably following. His inbox must have exploded. Sponsorships paused. Comments turned off. His followers, mostly women, started asking questions he couldn't answer. And her? She went quiet online. Not out of shame. Out of confusion. Because she didn't know I had done anything. That's what silence does when it's strategic. It makes the consequences feel like coincidence. I didn't celebrate. Didn't track the fallout past that point. I had nothing to gain. Just clarity to protect. Because while she was trying to build a new story without me, I was simply removing the illusions she thought were safe. And now, her freedom was starting to rot from the inside. People always think the consequences come from direct hits. But sometimes, they arrive through silence. Through conversations you're not invited to, but that start because of you. A friend of hers, Olivia, reached out to me. Not in defense. Not in anger. She just said, she's acting like nothing happened. But we all saw it. I didn't ask what it meant, because I already knew. It wasn't just the party. It wasn't the messages or the guy or the exposure. It was the accumulation. The mask slipping. The energy shift. The moment when people around her started realizing she wasn't the person they thought she was, and that I hadn't vanished out of guilt, but out of clarity. She was trying to hold on. Posting inspirational quotes. Dinner photos with forced smiles. Sudden interest in charity work. But none of it landed. Because people can sense when someone is broadcasting instead of living. And while she curated a version of herself online, her offline reality was crumbling. I found out through mutuals. People I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly started mentioning her, not with sympathy, but with confusion. Have you heard what happened? Is it true she was juggling more than one? She's been weird lately, paranoid. The worst part? No one was attacking her. They were just stepping back. The kind of distancing that doesn't come with confrontation, just absence. She started showing up alone. To dinners. To events. Even to the places we once went together, only now she sat in silence, scrolling her phone, waiting for someone to validate the image she was still trying to sell. And no one did. Because when your value is based on who you controlled, not who you were, people eventually stop showing up for the show. One of her friends, the loudest one from the party, even said it aloud. You really thought no one would notice? Not out of cruelty. Out of disappointment. They didn't hate her. They just saw her. Without the edits. Without the echo chamber. And they didn't like what stood in front of them. Meanwhile, I stayed in the background. No posts. No comments. No explanations. Just forward movement. She watched from afar. I knew she did. The occasional view on a story. The shared connection removed a week later. The passive likes that slipped through her alt account. She was still monitoring me. But I had stopped monitoring her. That's the difference between regret and release. One tries to rewind. The other has already walked out of the theater. There's a moment in every downfall when the noise stops. No more questions. No more rumors. No more defense. Just silence. The kind that presses in from all sides, not loud, not violent, just constant. That's where she found herself, alone in the places we used to call ours. Same coffee shop, same booth. Only now, no one waved. No one asked how she was. Because by now, they had seen too much, and she had said too little. The friends who once rallied behind her had faded. Not in betrayal, in fatigue. People get tired of pretending they believe you. She started reaching out. To people we knew. To people I hadn't spoken to in months. I heard about it secondhand. She asked if you were okay, one friend said. She said she misses the way things were, another told me. But she never told me directly. Because she knew. She knew the version of me she remembered was no longer reachable. I had changed. Not in appearance, but in presence. I was sharper now, quieter, harder to find. Not hiding, just choosing invisibility over performance. And that silence? It wasn't punishment. It was the sound of boundaries finally enforced. She began posting less. Stopped showing her face. The captions went from cheerful to vague. Motivational quotes that sounded like cries for attention. Still no apology. Still no truth. Just scattered attempts to rebuild an image she no longer controlled. That's what happens when your power depended on perception, and perception turns its back. She wasn't hated. She was forgotten. By everyone but herself. I passed her once, by accident. Parking lot. Groceries. She looked thinner. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone whose energy had been spent on maintaining a version of herself she no longer believed in. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But her eyes held something they never did before. Recognition. Of who I'd become. Of what she'd lost. And of the space between us. Vast, silent, permanent. I wasn't angry. I wasn't tempted. I was unmoved. She had entered a season of stillness. But I had already stepped into motion. It happened 3 weeks after the silence fully settled. I was walking out of a cafe. Regular spot. Quiet, clean. No history attached to it. That's why I chose it. She was standing near the street. Not accidental. Not surprised. She had waited. Probably watched from across the lot. Maybe even followed me for days to be sure I'd show. That's how desperation works. It doesn't burst in. It lingers. Watches. Hopes. I saw her before she moved. Same coat. Same eyes. But different posture. There was no confidence. No superiority. Just wait. Like she had been carrying weeks of unspoken questions, hoping they'd find answers once we made eye contact. I kept walking. Not fast. Not rude. Just without pause. She stepped in front of me. Said my name. Quiet. Like a question. I stopped. Not because I wanted to. Because I didn't want to run. I wasn't afraid of what she'd say. I was indifferent. And that indifference was louder than any words I could have thrown. She started with the basics. Can we talk? I didn't respond. She kept going. I didn't expect you to disappear like that. Still nothing. You hurt me. That almost made me laugh. But I didn't. Because this wasn't a scene. It was a performance for an audience of one, herself. She needed to believe she had some control left. Even if only over the narrative. But she didn't. Control dies when consequence enters. I looked at her. For a moment. Long enough for her to realize I had nothing left to say. She tried again. Not louder, softer. The kind of soft that used to melt me. That used to rewind our arguments back to silence and holding hands. But this time, it felt like a trick with no magic left. She asked if I'd ever come back. And that's when I spoke. One sentence. No. Nothing more. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because what needed to be said had already happened. In my silence. In my distance. In the life I rebuilt without her fingerprints on anything. She stepped back. Eyes wet, but not crying. There's a difference. She wasn't heartbroken. She was exposed. Because for the first time, she realized the game was over. Not because she lost, but because I stopped playing. Collapse doesn't happen all at once. It comes in slow waves. A missed call. An unanswered text. An invitation that never arrives. And then, eventually, a room full of people pretending not to notice you. She started disappearing from the circles she once dominated. The gym crew? Gone. Brunch friends? In new group chats. Even her family stopped asking about me. Because they sensed the shift. Not just in me, but in her. They didn't ask what happened. They already knew. When someone disappears from your life and refuses to explain, it forces people to look closer. To ask themselves why silence feels more honest than her words ever did. Her business started losing traction. She sold health products online. marketed through charm and curated vulnerability. But charm doesn't convert when trust evaporates. And vulnerability doesn't land when people see through the filter. She tried relaunches, rebrands, started sharing more about growth, about lessons, about healing. But no one clapped, because no one believed her anymore. People aren't cruel. They're just observant. And when patterns repeat long enough, even the kindest eyes turn cold. She posted a long caption one day. Something about forgiveness, about being misunderstood, about losing people who weren't meant to stay. I didn't respond, didn't react, didn't watch the whole video, because I wasn't in it. Not really. Just a shadow version of me she could frame however she needed, to keep herself from facing what she'd done. But I had no interest in correcting the narrative. I wasn't there to be right. I was there to be gone. And I was. Fully. Emotionally. Mentally. Physically. No photos remained. No gifts. No shared playlists. No saved addresses. My world had no echoes of her. She, on the other hand, was surrounded by ghosts. Not of what we were, but of what she could have had, if she'd just valued what was in front of her instead of chasing what made her feel untouchable. The hardest part for her wasn't the loss. It was the absence of response. No war. No closure. Just nothing. And sometimes, nothing is louder than any scream. I didn't build a new life to prove a point. I built it because the old one no longer fit the man I was becoming. And that man had no need to revisit the rubble. There wasn't a grand finale. No final message. No dramatic reveal. Just a morning like any other. Except I didn't think of her once. And that, more than anything, was the end. Not when she cheated. Not when I left. Not even when she begged with her eyes in that parking lot. The real ending came in silence. The kind that wraps itself around you and makes everything before it feel like a different lifetime. I saw her one last time. From a distance. She was at a cafe I used to love. Alone. Same drink. Different posture. She looked up and saw me. I didn't stop. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. The recognition that I wasn't hers anymore. Not emotionally. Not even historically. She'd become a footnote in a story she thought she was writing. But the pen had never been hers. She stood up. As if to wave. As if to say something. But I didn't slow down. I didn't nod. I didn't acknowledge. Because what she wanted wasn't me. It was the illusion of who I used to be, before she tested how far she could push before I broke. But I never broke. I just stopped showing up. That's what people like her never expect. They think men only leave when they explode. But some of us leave in the quiet. In the paperwork signed without comment. In the keys returned without a scene. In the photos deleted without hesitation. In the life rebuilt without the urge to broadcast. I built something new. Not louder. Not flashier. Just mine. With people who valued presence over performance. With peace instead of questions. And with a version of myself I didn't have to sacrifice for someone else's ego. She'll tell her story, I'm sure. She'll edit it. Cut the parts where she lied. Sharpen the parts where I left. Soften the parts where she was exposed. But it won't matter. Because I don't live in her story anymore. And she doesn't exist in mine. The last words I never said, they live here now. In this silence. In this absence. And if she ever wonders where I went, the answer is simple. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.